Regrettably, I'm about to cause trouble. Written and narrated by Amie McNee. Chapter 5. It was only when I was out in the cold in the middle of the main street that I realised I knew not where the whorehouse was. I looked up and down for a sign of disturbance, a sign of whoredom, but the town was empty. I had always thought of Watlington as a bustling hub of activity. It was eerie being in the streets with no carriages, no people. There were no stalls, no peasants spruiking cherries and apricots, just darkened doors and empty streets with upturned cobbles. I decided to turn left, towards what seemed to be the seamier end of town. I took an educated guess and turned down Cox Lane. There was movement and candlelight flickering down the other end. There was no sign saying whorehouse, but the women with their breasts out felt like sign enough. I drew my hood closer to my face and walked through the door I had opened as quietly as I might, careful not to touch anything with my bare skin. It was like a tavern, with a bar and lots of chairs, a big fireplace and music. It felt a bit like court, but the breasts, they were everywhere. I peered around the busy room looking for Annie, the tawny Moor. I moved further in, squeezing in between fully erect men dancing around with no shame. Oh God, what if one of them touched me? I found myself in the far corner of the room. I put my back to the wall and took a steadying breath. The next time you will be in a room like this, you will be in court, with a rounded belly and a lauded husband, and all would be right with the world, and never again would you have to witness inebriated men straddling working girls. Good God. I wished I could look at my feet, but I had to continue searching. I really didn't want to see a man with his codpiece unattached. What was this godlessness? These women were wild, with no restraints, nothing containing them, not even their clothes. Darling girl, I froze, my whole body taut. Are you looking for a lady tonight? The woman was heavily rouged, with bright blue eyes. She looked friendly enough, despite her large breasts also not being contained in her bodice. She didn't even look surprised at my presence. Did women often frequent brothels? I'm looking for Annie, the tawny Moor. Her eyes squinted a little. I have money, I added. She nodded. You looking for her services? In a way. I think she's just finishing up with someone, love. I'll let her know you're waiting. I wondered if she was finishing up with my husband. I couldn't quite summon the strength to feel jealous. It had not been a nice experience. I saw Annie immediately. Her skin was dark, and she had long braided hair. She was speaking to an older woman, perhaps the owner of the brothel, but she must have felt my gaze upon the back of her head because she turned to me. My heart thumped. I thumbed the mushroom in my pocket. What can I do for you, my lady? She had a Spanish accent. May we speak privately? Of course. She gave me a broad, genuine smile. I tried to return the gesture and waited for her to lead the way, but she didn't move. She was still wearing her large, stunning grin. Where shall we go? I pressed. We can go to my rooms. She stroked my arm. Her hands were so soft. We didn't move. You going to make me be unladylike, my lady? Excuse me? It is not nice to make a lady talk about money out loud. I have the money. I showed her my purse. She studied it carefully, as though determining its weight. Decidedly pleased, she nodded and led the way. The room she took me to was nice enough. It had a large bed and a tapestry hung in between two windows, but it smelt horrific. I actually gagged as she shut the door and the smell seeped into my nostrils. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me. I took off my hood, then quickly put it back, worried the smell of piss and vomit and God knows what might soak into my curls. Would you like to lay on the bed? She asked, sitting on the mattress herself. Just speak, Maude. You don't have another option. I swallowed. My name is Lady Magdalen Beckett, and my husband visits you. Her face changed drastically. She moved quickly past me to reopen the door she had so seductively just shut. I'm afraid you are mistaken, my lady. I have never met your husband before. Shakily, I walked over and put my hand on the door, pushing it closed. I heard her take a large inhale of breath, like she was about to scream. I want your help, I said quickly. She paused, lungs full of air. Zita and Hildy sent me. She let the air out slowly, blowing it in my face. It smelt sweet, like apples. Why would the wise women send you to me? She crossed her arms. Because my husband is about to annul our marriage. It is not because of me. He's not in love with me or anything of that sort. She was intent on defending herself. He couldn't be with a girl like me. I'm a Moor. She was playing with her hair. And a whore, she added as an afterthought. I shook my head. He thinks I'm a witch. She cocked her head and looked me up and down. I want to pay you to give him this. I got out the diced up mushrooms. Do you think it's possible? You just need to put them in his drink. So you are a witch. She was sporting a sideways grin. I bought these from the witches. I am not personally a witch. I am a lady, with a good family name and a fertile belly. I don't deserve his accusations. Well, obviously, you deserved them somehow. My face must have looked so pitiful, so sad, that she actually came forth to embrace me. Forgive me, Peach. She wrapped her arms around me and held me tight, seeming to suck the tension out of me. I felt myself fold into her arms. I suppose, once we get labelled something, we become it one way or another. She murmured, releasing me. I wiped my eyes of my tears. Will you do it? My voice broke. You know he's paying me good money every single night. If your mushrooms work, then I'll be losing a client. He is waiting to hear the news as to whether I am with child. If you do not help me with the mushrooms, then I will tell him tomorrow I am not pregnant and he will leave. She tapped her foot, thinking. Will you do it? I repeated. Yes, my lady, I'll do it. I exhaled. When will you next expect him? I asked, preparing myself to leave. She cocked her head to one side. He's here. What? You didn't see him? He's at the bar with his kinsman. He likes to drink himself under the table before he fucks. Christ. So do you want to do it tonight? She asked after a while. I nodded. Why don't you sit in here? She had walked over to a large trunk that stood at the end of the whore bed. She opened it and started pulling out dresses and sheets and what looked like a horsewhip. She shoved them under the bed. I'll knock on the door when I bring your husband in. You shut the lid and then I'll give him your drink. I looked at the trunk. How will I know when to come out? She bit her full lips. I'll leave the room after I've given him the drink. You'll hear the door shut. I nodded slowly. You sure you want this man to be your husband, love? She touched my arm. He isn't good in bed, and I be knowing when it comes to people's souls, and he's let the devil sit in his for far too long. My whole body convulsed in shivers. How do you know? I be knowing. That's not an answer. She led me over to the trunk. I stepped into it. Women have to trust their feelings. Sometimes we just know things. I had been sitting in the trunk for a half an hour. I had taken off my head cap and was wearing it like a mask around my face, so I breathed in the scent of cotton, not the scent of excretions. Perhaps Annie hadn't managed to convince him to tup. I stood. It would be morning soon, and I couldn't walk back to my court in the daytime. I needed to leave. What an absurd night. I took one step out of the trunk, and there was a knock on the door. Good God. I squatted myself down, and as gently as possible, let the lid fall on top of me. Perhaps I would be sick in here, and then I could swim in actual vomit, an upgrade from simply bathing in the odour. Let me touch your soft skin, Annie the tawny boar. I heard him knock into something. You can touch whatever you want, my lord. I heard the heavy sinking of bodies on the bed. Was she going to do as I asked? Had she tricked me? You just gotta be drinking this drink. Gives your friend a little bit of help. I heard him giggle like a young boy. It's not as easy when you've drunk a whole barrel. This will help him out. Why don't you drink this? It has bits in it. He sounded like a child. You know I don't like bits. If you want to have any fun tonight, you need to drink the bits. I heard a guttural spluttering sound. Good boy. Now I'm going to fetch you a little surprise. What sort of surprise? His voice had changed. It was harsh. Trust me. Her accent was smooth, convincing. You won't be disappointed. The door shut. I heard the sound of goblet on bench. I waited a few moments. The witches hadn't told me how long it might take for the potion to take its effect. How had it come to this? I pushed open the lid. I stood, standing in the trunk at the end of a whore's bed, staring at my naked, drunk, and now, God willing, bewitched husband. My tears fell, inexorable. This was not the life I had envisioned. My husband had not been surprised by the emergence of his wife from the trunk at the end of the horse bed. He merely blinked as though something had got in his eye. He blinked again. "Magdalen?" he said eventually. "Maud," I whispered. "You know, your father told me you had light brown hair," he said conversationally. "Bloody liar." The mushrooms mustn't be working. "I can see now your hair is very dark indeed. But I like the way it curls," he added, nodding to himself. I stepped out of the box, tripped on the lid, and hit the floor with a loud thud. He came to me, taking me by the elbow and bringing me to the bed. He sat me down and began playing with my hair. It was working. His eyes were glazed, not just from alcohol, but from something else. From magic, I supposed. I let my hand go up to his cheek and he melted into my fingers, pleasured at my touch. This was how our wedding night should have been. "Magdalen," he whispered. "Poor, enchanted boy." He began tracing my face shape with his fingers. "Your skin is nearly as soft as Annie the Tawny Moore's, and she has the softest skin in all the land." "Thank you," I whispered. I was sweating, but also shivering. "I don't care if you're a witch." He was kissing my fingers. "I'm not." "I don't care." No, I'm not." I took my finger out of his mouth and he looked like a baby who had been told to stop sucking. He grabbed for my hand again. "Let me have you." "I am bleeding," I told him, feeling myself blush. "I don't care. Let me have you. We must be one. We are one." He was grabbing at me. The elixir seemed to have entirely possessed him now. His eyes were more manic, and he looked at each piece of me with obsession and desire. He was overcome with a mind that was not his own. "I'll do anything to have you." How long did they say this would last? An evening? Was I going to have to keep giving him the mushrooms with every meal for our entire married life? I stood and let him undress me. I guess it wouldn't be too hard to give it to the kitchen staff and have them put it in his mead. He was constantly muttering praise about each of my parts. My skin was so soft, my hair so ringlety. He had never seen such perfect hands or more supple breasts. But just one mistake, one slip-up, one day when he didn't want mead, then he would see me for who I was. He might imprison me, murder me, divorce me like the king. When my skirts fell in a pool around me, he caught sight of my mark. "This." He bent down between my legs. I let out an audible sob, but he was so transfixed upon my mark that he did not notice. I shook with fear and sadness and shame. "It looks like a river, a winding river that goes all the way up the inside here." His fingers tickled my inner thigh as he tracked the shape up my leg, "and then pools out here in a lake." His hand brushed through my private hairs. "It is magic," he said in awe. Time stood still. I looked at him, hand on my lower belly, caressing the thing that had destroyed my life, that repulsed him and ruined my week-long marriage. He didn't move, like God had given me extra time to assess the situation, and he was frozen in a moment. This was all I ever wanted, but it was not real. It was forced by the means of which I was accused. If I lay with him, he would regret it. His tenderness for the rivers that ran over my body was not real. It might as well have been the witches themselves who knelt before me, because it was their doing, not Edward Beckett's. If I lay with him, it would be some sort of perverted rape. He did not deserve me. He did not want me. "I cannot do this," I whispered down to him. My small words triggered time. Seconds trickled by once again. He looked up at me like a dog, begging from the dinner table. "What, wife?" "You do not want me. I am a marred woman." "I want all of you. I want you to bear my children. I want to parade you around court. I want you tonight and all the nights after this." He got distracted momentarily by the clothes tucked under the bed. He reached for them, intensely interested in the fabrics, smelling them, fingering them. He was not in his right mind. After this had worn off, he would want anything but to see me again. I began redressing myself. His attention came back to me. Magdalen, don't leave me. Let me gaze upon you a moment more, please." Why was it so hard for people to call me Maude? I walked away, pulled the door open, and saw Annie, leaning against the corridor wall. She cocked her head. He hates me, I told her. Edward pulled the door open behind me and fell at my feet, still naked, muttering my name repeatedly. It does not look to be the case. He will hate me in the morning. They all hate me in the morning. She was watching the man-child mildly as he clawed at my legs, half sobbing, half laughing, begging me not to go. Why do you do it then? I asked. Because it pays for my dresses. I tried to shuffle myself away from Edward, but he was attached like a mollusk. Will he pay for your dresses? Annie asked, now petting the distressed Edward on the head. I suppose he would have. I'm her husband, giggled the fully grown naked man on the floor. I will buy you anything, and you will be the most beautiful woman in all of court, and even the king will be envious. Ah, cooed Annie. He will pay for a lot of dresses. He is bewitched. He is an asshole, Annie confirmed with a nod. I wanted her to tell me what to do. A bewitched asshole, she mused, her soft accent rolling over the words. That is 2 reasons to walk away right now. It was all I needed. I gave her a firm nod, and she bent down and physically detached my husband from my dresses. Magdalene! He bellowed down the hall. I ran fast, tripping over my half-done-up dresses, and then I ran home, the whole way home. A lord's daughter, dresses undone, reeking of the whorehouse in the early morning light.